Hello, welcome to the SIBO, SIFO and IBS class. I'm Claire Snowden-Darling.
I'm Laura Knowles.
Oh, we're so excited about this class because firstly, it's awesome. Secondly, IBS was the first, it was the first place where you and I really started questioning, wasn't it? It was where we started going down a rabbit hole alongside the medical model, seeing how they were working with IBS. And it was such a passion project for us both because we had really untreatable IBS our whole lives. And through our
personal story as well as a
professional story as well as a professional story. And we were so frustrated. Like, I actually think that IBS was the place that we got the most frustrated with the plenary world, because everything that we'd trained in was basically trying to get us to treat IBS as a gastric issue, as a gut issue. And we very quickly discovered that it's not a gut issue, weirdly, it's a hormone issue. So this like unfurled basically the training, the practitioner training that we teach in the College of Functional Wellness. But the SIBO and the SIFO work came off of that because Laura ended up down this massive rabbit hole, and this whole discovery of SIBO, and it's still so overlooked by the medical model, but there are people who are working with it. And it's this, so what we're going to talk you through tonight is so cutting edge. It's such new information. It's super sexy and super exciting. Whoever would have thought the bacterial overgrowth could be super sexy and super exciting?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And this is SIBO as a concept is incredibly new. I mean, the connection between constipation and SIBO was only really made in 2004. So it's really new stuff, and it's changed our clinics. It's changed our courses, and so we really wanted to do a talk on it, to deep dive into it and to tell you more.
It's also changed our health. I've just spotted that my Wi-Fi is a little bit sketchy, so I'm just going to switch sides. So I'll go weird for a
Okay, so I will talk you through this. This is just for anybody who is new. So this is a classroom that we're offering as part of our diploma training. So I know that we've got students who are joining us on our diploma training. But if you are doing this as a drop-in class, then we are specialists in kinesiology, wellness, nutrition and emotional coaching. We have been doing this for many years, and it is a combination of research, clinical experience, because we've both been in clinic for many years, and like Claire said, our own journeys of ill health. And because we both had the experience of being let down by the medical model, and particularly with things like digestion and SIBO, I personally was very much let down by the medical model. And the holistic model, actually, it's looking on both, is that is where this work came from. And so we really layer the SIBO work on on the core of what we offer, which is the triangle of hormonal health, the stages in which we work, and then our 6 pillars. So we're going to be looking at blood sugar, stress, hormones, digestion, immune system.
And what is so glorious with our SIBO work in particular, in fact, our SIBO and our hormone work, but as we're talking about SIBO today, don't talk about hormones, Claire. So what's so glorious about our SIBO work is actually now how we have bridged the gap between the complementary health world and the medical model. So we have a very clear pathway of when we end and the medical model begins, and we have partnered with medical practitioners who understand that the way that we work, in fact, they say the only way that you're going to be able to get rid of SIBO is to do all the stuff that we are going to be talking you through before someone actually goes into the medical pathway, because the medical pathway should be a piece of the jigsaw puzzle. But particularly with SIBO, you need a load of preparatory work and you need a load of work afterwards, and then sometimes this medical intervention in the middle. So being able to partner with the practitioners who understand that medically, and actually being able to give clients this whole seamless journey, if needs be, it's actually really pioneering and groundbreaking and truly extraordinary. And what's so exciting about it is people often come because they know, oh, well, I know I can actually have the thing and the doctors are sending me and blah, blah, blah. And then doing this work, they don't even need that medical intervention, because the work actually clears up a lot of SIBO cases. It's only really the very stubborn ones that then do need that intervention further down the line.
Oh, that's exciting.
It is exciting.
So what is SIBO? Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It is a gutting condition where the types of bacteria that are more commonly found in the large intestine are found in the small intestine, and it contributes to gut dysbiosis and a real gut microbiome imbalance, and you can get it all the way through the digestive tract. And the difficulty with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is that it damages the gut lining and contributes to leaky gut, which is gut permeability, intestinal permeability. And this is where a lot of the immune problems that we work with are found. And working with that leaky gut, we're going to be covering that in this talk. So if you decide that you are going to explore what SIBO your client has, there are 3 different categories: hydrogen dominant, methane dominant, and hydrogen sulfide. Now, hydrogen dominant is your typical SIBO. It's a bacterial overgrowth, and the main symptom with the hydrogen dominant is diarrhea. Methane dominant is typically SIFO, so that is small intestinal fungal overgrowth. So there's a fungus imbalance rather than a bacterial imbalance, and the main symptom with that is constipation. And then hydrogen sulfide, which is quite a new kid on the block, has a sort of rotten egg smell on the breath, and it usually creates more diarrhea, but is not shown on traditional SIBO lab tests. So it's a tricky one to work with, but can be spotted with that rotten egg smell. Mm. We also wanted to talk about Candida. Candida albicans has been going around for many years. I mean, it was very popular in the 90s. Was it 90s or noughties?
Noughties.
90s and noughties.
90s and noughties. Who didn't have Candida? You weren't cool if you hadn't had Candida.
And it is a common yeast infection. It's an overgrowth again, found in the mouth, intestinal tract, and the vagina. And actually, many of the approaches with Candida overgrowth is kill, kill, kill. But actually, Candida is a fungus that aids with nutrient absorption and digestion. It's a part of how our digestion works. We just need to bring it into balance. And you can tell when it's in balance because you get symptoms like a white tongue, athlete's foot, like fungal conditions, reoccurring thrush, skin conditions. It contributes to leaky gut again. It often comes off the back of medication, such as the pill and regular antibiotic use. And the very famous Candida diet, which tends to be low sugar, no mushrooms. It's been a long time.
No tomatoes.
Yeah.
No wheat, but you can have rye. Like it's quite bizarre.
We found the Candida diet to be very ineffective, and actually underneath the Candida tends to be it's addressing the medication imbalance, as well as looking at food intolerances and blood sugar instability, which we are going to cover in depth. So I think it's worth noting that Candida is not responsible for every digestive complaint.
Yeah.
And it is, if you've got the client who has these symptoms, then yes, you can be thinking that Candida is a problem, but you'd be approaching it in the same way as we are going to be talking you through. So
yeah. And the medical belief around Candida is just a sugar imbalance. So that's blood sugar imbalance and sugar in the diet passing through the gut.
Yeah. So symptoms of SIBO, we'll come back to SIBO and SIFO, are your classic digestive symptoms: stomach pain, belching, IBS. There's some really interesting research about, they did a clinical trial and found that 95% of IBS sufferers had SIBO. So they've made this real connection between IBS and SIBO, which I think is fascinating. Bloating, acid reflux, like you can see all of the digestive conditions. Where it gets interesting for us is when we start to see the endocrine hormone immune system playing a role within SIBO, and that is your high histamine, your skin issues,
yeah,
fatigue, inflammation, sleep issues, gallbladder issues, fibromyalgia, thyroid conditions, diabetes, and estrogen buildup. And we're going to explain how this endocrine immune system link is connected with SIBO. The fats in stools is a really interesting one. It's good to get these ideas of these symptoms so that you can tell your clients to look out for them. So if they're checking their stools, for example, and they see floating fats in their stools, SIBO stops bile production working effectively, which is how we digest fats. And so indigested fats is a common symptom. So yeah, there it is. I was ahead of the game. It was published in 2000 that they reported 80%. Actually, the latest study is it was 95%. So there's all these different studies that are coming through that are showing this connection between IBS and SIBO. And so we want to be looking at SIBO when we have someone who comes into our clinic who is talking about having IBS. Oh my God, this is such a big slide. What's the causes? the causes of SIBO. There's quite a few. Okay, I'll start with the top line, and then Claire, if you want to take over for the second line. So food poisoning is one of the first questions that I ask in my clinic when someone comes in complaining of digestive conditions. If there has been a food poisoning, sometimes abroad maybe, and if you explore around that, and you find that that is when a lot of their symptoms maybe started after that food poisoning, that really points to SIBO. Repeated antibiotic use. The medical profession are getting better with not just handing out antibiotics like sweets, but there was a period, definitely in the 90s, where antibiotics were the go-to. They just were seen as the miracle cure for everything, and so they were just handed out willy-nilly. And so you will see clients who come in who have digestive issues who have repeated antibiotic use. And those antibiotics that are, yes, potentially killing off the bad bacteria, they're killing off all the bacteria in the gut. So when you haven't got that bacterial balance, then it can start to overgrow. Food intolerances, I believe we are going to come into more detail, but this is one of the fundamental, I think it's the first talk that we did in this series of lectures about food intolerances, so please check it out. Food intolerances is so key. It's such a foundation piece of our work. And when we have a client who comes in and maybe they've been seeing us for quite a few months and they're going, I still have this, I'm still not getting better, I'm still having digestive symptoms, I always go back to food intolerances and go, right, can you list what you're having for breakfast, lunch and dinner and what snacks? And usually I can find something going on there. So it's what we recommend when we teach our therapies is remember to go back to those fundamentals with your clients. Don't forget the food intolerances. High processed food diets. Definitely the food that's going in is going to create an environment in the small intestine. The small intestine is where we absorb our nutrients. It's where we get our goodness from. And so if we're putting rubbish in, we're going to be getting rubbish out. So making sure that processed foods is really limited. And I want to highlight here, we did a video this week about vegan diets, that vegans to get a variety in their palate can often opt for processed foods, thinking they're healthy because they were bought from a health food store, for example, but they can be heavily processed, ultra processed, I think they're called. So watch out for those processed foods when it comes to SIBO. If there's been a history of processed foods, it can really lead to a bad gut environment. And high carb diets, I mean, we bang on this a lot, and we are going to go into more detail later on, but having regular sugar going in, yes, people understand that cakes and biscuits and sweets are sugar, but when we start to see that fruit and vegetables and grains are also carbohydrates, then we start to look at, okay, I now understand why there is an imbalance in the gut. And blood sugar instability. We're going to cover that a little bit more about why blood sugar contributes to SIBO.
So stress, well, at a very basic level, stress, the amount of cortisol that we produce during when we're stressed, actually the body stops being able to clear it out. It doesn't know how to clear it out, and that ends up getting stuck in our gut, which creates the environment that SIBO can flourish in. And so ultimately the work we're always doing is how can we create an environment that the SIBO can't flourish in, that we want to be able to bring it all back into balance. Stress also means that we stop the production of stomach acid and enzymes, which is one of the boxes at the end, but that stress stimulates the sympathetic nervous system response, which stops us being able to make our stomach acid, which in turn then creates an environment that is ripe for SIBO to go crazy. Key hormonal events. So it is really common that we see, for example, IBS starting when young girls hit puberty. And so that is a combination of factors, but there's something around the hormones being triggered at puberty, and we're going to come on to those, I imagine. And also, of course, the key time for women particularly is peri to post menopause. SIBO is rife at perimenopause. You hear women talking all the time about the bloating, how I now can't, I just can't drink, I can't drink champagne, I can't go near fermented foods. And this is because of the connection with SIBO and histamine, and SIBO just goes mad as soon as we have this estrogen sort of fluctuation and the progesterone dropping off. This is again creating the right environment, an unstable environment in the gut, which SIBO just latches hold of. So estrogen excess, as I was just saying, that would be one of them. But the estrogen excess doesn't just come because of puberty. As Laura was saying earlier, things like the pill, actually xenoestrogens, which are in, xenoestrogens are chemicals that mimic estrogen that are found in toxic chemicals that we put on our skin, in our cleaning products, in pesticides. Again, that comes into toxic load in a moment. All of these things become estrogen mimickers, which then create something called xenoestrogen in our body. And so that estrogen excess, our body has to clear out. Low progesterone tends to be what's happening when we go into perimenopause. But actually, and again, this is a whole other talk, we're seeing low progesterone in really young girls now, and that's because partially this estrogen excess, they're all under stress and they're not eating in a way that is supportive to their hormones, and of course things like medication such as the pill. Hypothyroidism, again, it's just the body's metabolism's not working. All of the hormones just get completely in flux, and that creates an environment that's right for SIBO. I've mentioned the low stomach acid. Want me to continue?
No, I can keep going. I wanted to say with hypothyroidism, that is that metabolism connection, because the thyroid helps the body metabolize. And so when it is hypo, it is slowing down the digestion, which means food is staying in the body longer, which is creating an environment for SIBO. I think what really stands out from this slide for me is why SIBO is so rife.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to sort of drill home is that it's not just about SIBO. We've got this toxic soup that we've got to deal with, that we have to work with if we're going to get underneath SIBO. I'm going to keep going. So you mentioned pesticides, toxic load, toxic chemicals, the vagus nerve stress, which we're going to come on to a little bit more. So this taps into the adrenal stress as well, and the vagus nerve is part of our the digestive communication that happens with the brain. Structural imbalance, so this comes from more of our kinesiology training. When there is a structural imbalance, if there is a hip that's out, or there is a short leg, or there is stress in the body that twists the body, then we start to get imbalances in the digestive system.
But equally, structural imbalances can also come through surgery. So if anyone's actually had any kind of bowel surgery, that then medically is also one of the key places that they start to notice that SIBO becomes really prevalent.
Immune deficiency that is not keeping SIBO bacteria in check. And then we're also looking at, that says mediation, I should say medication. There's not enough mediation in the world that's keeping SIBO in check, but it's also the pill and PPIs, which is the digestive suppressants. So we often see that people will have irritable bowel syndrome or acid reflux, go to the GP. They'll be recommended to take an acid suppressant like omeprazole, and then that stops the stomach acid, which controls the environment of the gut, and so then SIBO is allowed to grow. So the traditional approach to SIBO is to take antibiotics, and we are not anti-antibiotics. They have a place, and we will show you where we see their place fitting. What I think we do see is when the foundations are not dealt with, antibiotics don't last. They can maybe give temporary relief, but then the symptoms come back and the SIBO comes back because the underlying causes are not being addressed. And so then we find that clients are going into a vicious cycle of, well, I know the antibiotics work, so I'm going to take another course of them. And so then they don't work, and then they take another course of them. And then this vicious cycle just contributes to more SIBO and more of a gut dysbiosis situation. The herbal treatments, again, has this, we must kill the bacteria. It's the bacteria's fault. And so there are, and we talk about the supplements that we use and the herbal treatments that we use. And again, we believe that they have a place, but if we're not doing the foundation work, they just won't work. And they're not often strong enough to be able to kill all of the bacteria and deal with any of the foundation work. The FODMAP diet, which is quite an interesting diet, which is cutting out the simple sugars in foods to stop feeding the bacteria. So it can give temporary relief, but again, it's not a long-lasting solution. There are some real question marks in FODMAP. There's some, for example, there's some chemicals, there's, oh, the word's falling out of my head. The one that the artificial sugar.
Yeah, that. Not sucralose, salt.
Oh, aspartame. Yeah. I know. Aspartame is recommended in FODMAP diet, which absolutely blows my mind. So there's some real question marks that we've got around the FODMAP diet, and it can give relief, but it doesn't get underneath it. And so we have seen that this traditional approach is myopic, and we want to look at the bigger picture. And so let's have a look at the bigger picture. So this is the lovely digestive system, and we chew our food, it comes down into the stomach. You can see the stomach on the left-hand side, and the stomach acid and the combination of enzymes breaks our food down and turns it into a chyme to be able to go into the small intestine to be absorbed, and then for the waste to go into the large intestine to be excreted. I mean, that's a very simple, basic, that's the digestive system. And what we see is that many clients have an imbalance of stomach acid and enzymes. Maybe they've got too much stomach, not enough enzymes, or they've got very low stomach acid and low enzymes, but it's disguised as high stomach acid so that they end up being on a acid suppressant. And this combination is really, it's a delicate combination that is very much affected by food intolerances. So if we're regularly putting in foods that we're intolerant to, that is where we see this imbalance going out. Now we've also got the liver, and the role here is the bile secretion, which I mentioned. It also has a big role in hormone detox. And this bile, like I said earlier, is breaking down our fats, but if there is a SIBO environment, it will be absorb. It will be stopping that bile being able to do its job. It neutralizes it, and so then fats aren't absorbed. So again, this is where the stomach pain is coming from. We also look at the pancreas. One of the things that the pancreas is well known for producing insulin and often seen in blood sugars, but 95% of its job is production of digestive enzymes. It's a digestive job. The majority of what it does is digestion. And so the more that we can balance our blood sugars and support the pancreas, the more that we can digest. And so it's important to be able to understand this connection between the endocrine and this production of hormones and this production of digestive enzymes. I mean, the digestive enzymes are stimulated by a hormone response. And so if our endocrine is out of whack and our gut is out of whack, there's this absolute connection that's happening. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, anything else you wanted to add? No, keep going.
No, I'm just laughing to myself because I cannot menopause one and the HRT one. I'm just like doing all the talking. I'm just sat here listening.
Give me that
Showing you all
gut.
like loads of your research.
Oh, give
My
me the
dogs are barking.
guts. It's passion area. It's a passion area. Okay, you can do this bit.
Yay! Thanks. Okay, so the triangle of hormonal health. This is the bedrock of the work that we do, that the training that we offer is based on. And this is a clinical model that we created after vast research. And basically it looks at that there is a hormonal interplay between 3 sets of hormones. And this hormonal interplay is really, really overlooked, but the research, you don't even have to scratch below the surface. It's everywhere. And we love it because we just keep listening to podcasts and then they'll just reiterate this work, but nobody else has actually put it together in a working model. So basically 3 sets of hormones: our blood sugar hormones, our stress hormones, and our sex hormones. And imagining like you've got a stool, and for a stable stool, for a stable body, for your body to be working beautifully, you need the 3 legs of your stool to all be like even and doing their job. The problem is if one of those goes out of kilter, you've now got an unsteady stool, which puts pressure on the other 2. And then when another leg goes down, you've now got, it's just all a bit of a mess. And by the time the 3rd one goes down, I mean, you haven't got a stool left at all. So this is kind of a really simplistic description of what's happening in the body. So sex hormones are so key for men and women. I mean, women, it's really easy to see, but it's huge in men too. But basically, we just need 2 of the pillars to be a bit wonky in this triangle for symptoms to start appearing. And the first symptoms that tend to start appearing are in what we call the victims, the digestive system and the immune system. So it's actually incredibly myopic to look at the digestive system. It's incredibly myopic to look at and work with the immune system. We are going to be working with them, but so much further down the line. And this is where we weren't getting better. We were only getting clients to a certain point. As very well-trained nutritionists and kinesiologists, there was just that nobody was talking about proper blood sugar stabilization, really how to deal with stress hormones. Yes, we were talking about, herbs for stress and this, that, and the other, and lifestyle and those things, but not really in this very clinical way where it was so fundamental to health, so fundamental. So we are going to explain to you how they are actually, we've kind of covered it a bit in the first slides, but we're going to drill into why they're so key. So understanding the role of blood sugars. So the blood sugar connection, I mean, I could literally spend all day, this is my passion area, but I could spend all day talking to you about this, because the more we drill down into this work, the more we find, and actually the more research is coming out on almost a weekly basis around this. It's absolutely astonishing. So at the very basic level, so let's talk about the migrating motor complex, which is, it's the broom that sweeps through the small intestine. It's literally, it's like it's the cells, isn't it? It's the villi that start moving, and it's the way that they move that literally sweeps our food through our gut. The MMC, as we're going to call it, is very, very sensitive to blood sugar instability, and we're going to show you why in a moment. So high blood sugar damages the nerves in the gut, which communicate with the brain. And some of you might be saying, oh, well, low blood sugar is the issue in things like diabetes, but what goes up must come down. Low blood sugar is the same side of the coin as high blood sugar. So blood sugar instability is high or low. It's just, our blood sugars should have a nice sine wave. It's when they're peaking or troughing. Our migrating motor complex is also regulated by the vagus nerve, and we're going to be talking about that to you a little bit more shortly. High cortisol levels impair gut function, and they reduce immune secretion in the gut, which is supposed to protect us from a bacterial overgrowth. And so if we have got any stress, we're just not going to be producing that immune secretion.
And that's the thing with blood sugar instability. It's incredibly stressful for the body.
It's incredibly stressful. So we've got the slide for that, haven't we?
Have we?
I think so.
Yes, we do.
Yes, there we are. Hooray! So you can see what we're talking about. So basically this nice green sine wave is how our blood sugars should be. That's like how we are meant to be. But what happens when we eat a high carbohydrate diet, or we're fasting under stress, or just we're very stressed, because we can end up diabetic through stress alone, even if our diet was peach keen. What's going to happen is, as we so classically, if we wake up in the morning, we're hungry and we eat some toast, our blood sugars are going to rise. Well, our body will produce insulin in response to our blood sugars rising to a certain level, and then insulin will plummet those blood sugars back down from whence they came, not to where they're supposed to go to. Now, when they are below a certain level, our body has no choice but to produce cortisol. So cortisol's job is to put sugar into our muscles and bloodstream. It's to get us out of danger. So at a very basic level, it's to make us get off the sofa and go get food. It's like literally, prehistorically, like run away from the saber-toothed tiger. That's what it was there for. These days, it's to actually get us to function. The problem is cortisol's job is to get us out of danger. It's just that our bodies don't realize that danger isn't the fact that the alarm clock's gone off and the kids are shouting, and we're constantly in this stress suit where we're creating loads and loads of cortisol. So the cortisol is constantly spiking our blood sugars, which then have to drop. And then you start to compound that, like I said, either with fasting, which can be quite inappropriate if people have got unstable blood sugars, or high carbohydrate diet or refined carbohydrate diet, very processed food diet. Now we're starting to see basically a cortisol and insulin roller coaster throughout the day.
And so layering this into SIBO and to IBS is that this high cortisol, these imbalanced blood sugars, are creating an environment where SIBO is going to grow.
Well, on another basic level, cortisol in small amounts is anti-inflammatory, in higher amounts it becomes inflammatory. But even in the small amounts that will be produced, just every single time our blood sugars are dropping, it's an anti-inflammatory. Now, when you think about it, the way that our food moves through our gut by the migrating motor complex and also through peristalsis, it's that there's this sort of muscle cramping that moves it through. Even with the muscle cramping with cortisol, a small amount of cortisol in the system, that can't happen. So we're literally stopping our guts from doing the job that they are supposed to do by having this stress hormone introduced. So this gets me so excited because really nobody's talking about it enough. So we've talked about insulin. Everybody knows about insulin. It's a very clever hormone, but its job is to lower blood sugar. It also goes into fat storage. It tells the body there is an issue. We need to store fat because there could be a famine coming. So we need to just hold fast. So people who've got real sort of weight issues, we're definitely thinking there must be an insulin imbalance, there's a blood sugar imbalance. Now, what's really interesting, 3 other hormones that people don't really talk about very often: leptin, ghrelin, and cholecystokinin. Leptin its job is to reduce appetite and to be in fat burning, so that's one that's great. And ghrelin is hunger. So that's the hormone that after you've eaten, it is all topped up, and then as you have a gap between food, it drops, and when it goes the other way, doesn't it? It rises, and when it hits a certain level, that's when your tummy will rumble. So I call it the gremlin because it's like the gremlin in your tummy rumbling. What's really interesting is both of those are also responsible for anxiety. We'll be talking about anxiety in a future Zoom class. We then have cholecystokinin, and this is really important. Not only is cholecystokinin also involved in satisfaction and anxiety and memory, it is hugely connected with gut motility. It has a connection with a hormone called motilin, and motilin is one of the hormones that makes the migrating motor complex work. So if my blood sugars are unstable, I don't have gut motility. If I don't have gut motility and my MMC is not working, I am going to create, nothing's being swept out, I'm getting a bacterial overgrowth buildup.
Oh, I love it.
I know.
Okay, Let's talk about stress. Do you want to do this one?
So endocrine system 101, we have our hypothalamus and we have our pituitary gland, which are responsible for lots of things, but predominantly for the purposes of this talk, receiving messages. So the hypothalamus is the nervous system, eyes, ears, nose, etc. And its job is to see when danger's coming. So see it, smell it, touch it, danger, danger, danger. The pituitary gland does pretty much, just does loads of stuff in the endocrine system, but it's the leader of the orchestra with the gland. So nervous system, this is actually a proper gland, and it gets messages not through the nervous system, but through the chemical messages of hormones. So that would be a message like, my bladder's full, I need a wee. It would be, I'm hungry. It would be, that would be like, the ghrelin signals, etc. So it will be responsible for getting all of those messages and then deciding what to do on the back of it, and then telling our body which hormones to produce to fix that problem. Pineal gland is light and dark, so it's our circadian rhythms and sleep and waking. Thyroid gland, as Laura's mentioned, is metabolism. It's also weight. It's also heat regulation. Thymus is immune. Pancreas, as Laura said, 2 jobs. It has the insulin production and it also has this digestive function. And it's supposed to do more of the digestive function. And then we have our adrenal glands that live on top of our kidneys, which are responsible for the production of our stress hormones, but also some of the sex hormones we're going to talk about later. And then we have the testes and the ovaries, which of course are mostly responsible for our sex hormones. I apologize for my dog. So what happens when people have got endocrine imbalances is we have tired and exhausted, we have wired and racy, sugar cravings, inflammation, digestive problems, colds and bugs, sleeping difficulties, headaches, weight gain or weight loss problems. They get hot or cold, but inappropriately, low sex drive or irregular periods, and loads of other period issues. She'll stop now, someone's coming in. So what happens when we are getting the messages around danger? And like I was saying, the problem that we've got in today's world is that our bodies don't, it's like our stress hormones should be mobilizing when there's a saber-toothed tiger behind us, when there's danger, when there's a train that's coming towards us. I don't know why we're on the track, but like these are the reasons that, to get us out of danger. But our bodies now have become so overwhelmed with stress. Everything, I don't like the word stress, I talk about stressors, that everything is a stressor to the human body now. The amount of pollution, the amount of radiation, the amount of toxic chemical exposure, artificial light, the gadgets, I mean, the list literally is endless. So what happens when we are exposed to any kind of stress, the hypothalamus and the pituitary sends this message, this green line, to the adrenals that says produce cortisol. And the adrenals produce the cortisol, and then they send this memo back, which is the red line, to the hypothalamus and the pituitary to say, I've done it, stop sending the memo. But the problem is that was 20 minutes ago in response to something else. Now the kids are having an argument, or now an email's come in that I have to deal with. And so now there's another memo coming. And after a while, so this is called the HPA axis, so the hypothalamus, pituitary and adrenal axis, called conversation in normal language. What happens is after a while, this feedback, this red memo, this feedback memo gets switched off. And so now there is just one message, make cortisol. And so this is called the HPA axis dysregulation or dysfunction. And this is pretty much the state that most people are in most of the time, and is hugely a cause of the chronic conditions that we're seeing today. And so in terms then of the gut, we are just producing so much cortisol all the time and not using it effectively, spiking our blood sugars. We've got loads of insulin, we've got all this cortisol. We've just created all of these hormones, which already we've told you are going to be going into the gut and the body can't clear through.
And what's important about the endocrine is that all of the glands work together as a family. So if that HPA axis is dysregulated and the hypothalamus and the pituitary are going, wow, we're under quite a lot of danger, how are we going to cope with this? Then the messages that are coming to the pancreas to produce those digestive enzymes are not going to be coming through. The messages going to the thyroid about our metabolism and slowing down our digestion are not going to come through. And so we need to have this understanding that all the glands are affected by this stress connection, and it throws the digestion off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, have we got anything about the vagus nerve connection? So this is this connection with the stress picture. And you can see that the vagus nerve comes from the brain and it comes into the digestive system. And it's when we are under a lot of stress, then this vagus nerve connection doesn't function properly. And so then the brain is not sending the messages that is needed to have the digestive system working effectively. And so, yeah, go on.
Go on. No, go on.
So having high stress, high cortisol, high insulin in the body has this damaging effect on the vagus nerve. We also, I mean, we work very physically as practitioners, and we work with the muscles through the neck, which are connected with the stomach. We work with the muscles that are through the chest, which are also linked into the stomach. We work with the abdominals, which are linked in with the small intestine. And so when it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. If the vagus nerve is stressed, then that has an effect on the muscles, and the digestive system isn't working effectively, that has an effect on the muscles. And so if the structural misalignment is out, then also the digestive system can't work effectively. So you've kind of got this all from lots of different sides, sort of taking the digestive system down.
And what's also interesting is that the vagus nerve is part of the communication around the fight or flight response, fight, flight, or freeze. There's 3 stages in which the vagus nerve gets involved. And the vagus nerve actually it actually runs into every single one of the major organs except for the large intestine. And so then we can start to see why constipation and diarrhea are so huge in things like IBS, because the vagus nerve's like had all this communication. It's kind of decided that we're in fight, flight, or freeze, and then the large intestine just sat there going, I don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do. So vagus nerve is huge, and again, the research around that is pretty new.
Oh, the hormone cycle and gut dysbiosis.
You do this one, I'll do the other one.
Okay. So we start with the endotoxins, which is on the right hand side. So you can see the lipopolysaccharides, which is the endotoxins that are the poor food that is going through into our gut, or if we've got that leaky gut, the gut dysbiosis, if you come back to the earlier one, gut dysbiosis and gut permeability, allows endotoxins to be absorbed into the bloodstream and comes through the gut barrier. Now, what is fascinating about this is that these endotoxins can travel to different parts of the body. And we wanted to show this from the hormone cycle. It can travel to anywhere. It can travel to the skin. It can travel to different organs. It can travel to the sex organs. And we chose traveling to the ovaries because we just thought that this was a fascinating cycle. So you've got these endotoxins coming into the bloodstream from the leaky gut, and they travel to the ovaries. And this impacts the corpus luteum, which is where we produce our progesterone. At that lowered production of progesterone has huge consequences. We're looking at the female body. In the female body, we're looking at the female body here. And one of the things when progesterone is low in a fertile woman's body, it can increase cortisol, so stress goes up. Progesterone is one of our lovely calming hormones. When it's not there, it's incredibly stressful. So when we've got low progesterone, we've got increased cortisol, we've also got increased inflammation because we've got endotoxins going around the body, we are then starting to see period and fertility problems. With the period problems, this compacts the issue on low progesterone. It's when progesterone is low, then we start to see estrogen climbing, and there's this relationship between estrogen and progesterone. And so we've then got this imbalance where estrogen is kind of trying to do all the work and there's no progesterone to be able to help it. This equals constipation, and this is the connection with the the vagus nerve imbalance, with this low progesterone and this high estrogen. When we have constipation because we don't have enough progesterone, then with the constipation, we get gut dysbiosis and gut permeability, which means then we get more endotoxins circulating around the body. Fascinating.
Absolutely fascinating.
The other estrogen connection, there is an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. I sound ever so clever when I say that word. I love it. Beta-glucuronidase is an enzyme that is created by gut bacteria. And its job is to reabsorb toxins, drugs and hormones, such as estrogen, and reabsorb them into the bloodstream. So we want to be keeping beta-glucuronidase low. When there is high gut bacteria, there is high beta-glucuronidase, and that means that we get higher toxin levels, higher endotoxins, higher estrogen, lower progesterone, and we see this cycle in women a lot.
We do. And just kind of going back to that, the endotoxins, that is the issue. That is what causes inflammation, as Laura said. We kind of focused on it on the last slide in the ovaries, but that is what causes the skin issues. That is what causes joint pain. That is what causes all of it. Like, inflammation is the cause. That is the cause of human chronic conditions. So the pregnenolone steal. So we talk about this a lot, and this is because it's hugely important. So in our adrenal glands, we don't just make our sex hormones. As I said, we don't just make our sex hormones in our testes and ovaries, we also make them in our adrenal glands. And so coming back a moment to puberty and to perimenopause. So in puberty, obviously the ovaries are kind of, they're gearing up to do their work, and in perimenopause, the ovaries are switching off their work. But there's this background of these hormones made by the adrenal glands, which creates like a stability throughout our lives. And so the reason, and again, this is a huge topic, but the reason why women are experiencing more profound menopause symptoms these days is because our adrenal glands aren't able to make this background. So the transition from ovaries making to the adrenals making just isn't happening effectively. It's very, very interesting. In the adrenal glands, there's a couple of pathways here that we want to talk you through. So the adrenal glands make adrenaline and noradrenaline. It's kind of a given by their name. They also make the hormone aldosterone, and aldosterone is a really interesting one because it's fluid retention and blood pressure. And they're two things that particularly perimenopausal women complain a lot about, or even women with fertile women with that often have really bad fluid retention issues, and they're just put on fluid pills, which is ridiculous because it's actually coming from aldosterone. But looking at the sex hormone pathway, the adrenal glands use cholesterol, which is fat. Basically, it's fat. So you can imagine another reason we're having terrible menopause is because of low fat diets that people have been eating for 40 years. And from cholesterol, we make a precursor hormone called pregnenolone. Now, pregnenolone will go on to make progesterone and DHEA, and DHEA goes on to make testosterone and estrogen. Lovely job. Progesterone means progestation hormone. As Laura said, it's a calming hormone. It literally calms down the whole of the female body. Progestation hormone, it is to do with fertility or the thickening of the womb lining, but it's not just to do with that. However, the body basically, the pregnenolone kind of goes, it's more important if I'm under stress. Is it more important to hold a baby, or is it more important for me to be able to run away from danger? And it basically kind of skips progesterone and makes cortisol. So actually, this is what we're seeing, even not in perimenopause women, this is what we're seeing in really, really young women who are presenting with the gut issues, the IBS, the skin problems, all of these kind of issues. We're seeing this pregnenolone steal happening in really, really young women where their body's just not making enough progesterone because of stress. And the stress, or the stressors, you know, schooling, lifestyle, social media, diet, food intolerance, is always diet and food intolerance, toxic chemicals, all of the things we've been talking about. So when we don't have enough progesterone, we've got too much cortisol. And if we've got too much cortisol, our blood sugars are going to be imbalanced, our MMC is going to be imbalanced. When this is the issue. So we're always looking at these foundations of getting the blood sugars right, getting that stress hormone down, but we have to balance out those sex hormones at the same time, because otherwise you can see we're just not going to get that digestive tract sorted. So go on.
No, you do the hormones, I'll do the digestion.
So as we were just saying, basically what happens in peri to postmenopause, but like I was just saying, this is what we're seeing in these young women, is estrogen and progesterone should track, then progesterone kind of falls off the cliff, and then we have comparatively too much estrogen. So this actually, it's called estrogen dominance. It's a bit of a misnomer. It should be called progesterone deficiency. It's this progesterone falling off a cliff. And then later into the latter stages of perimenopause and into menopause, estrogen just does this before it too starts to decline. But this is the issue, this imbalance. This is what we are seeing in very, very, very young women, all the way through now to postmenopausal women. And just actually thinking about the slide before, it's those adrenal glands choosing to make cortisol, which also then impedes on testosterone production. So this isn't just, a women's issue. This is why we're seeing men with so much testosterone, low testosterone issues. Yeah, that was the peri to postmenopause thing.
Okay, the immune system. So there is a really interesting connection between SIBO and endometriosis that is a relatively new study that has come out in the last couple of years. So endometriosis is inflammatory lesions, usually in the pelvis. And there was a study of 50 women who had endometriosis, and they found that 40 of them had SIBO. And so this could be that endotoxin picture that we were talking about earlier, that these endotoxins are, so the gut is damaged, endotoxins that should not be going into the bloodstream are entering the bloodstream, and then they are storing themselves in a part of the body. And what is so fascinating about endometriosis is it does behave like a microbial disease. So women have reported improvement when they've taken antibiotics. So they have found that this gram-negative bacteria, and that is the endotoxins, have been found in this pelvic area and possibly caused by the gut permeability. So it's transmitting from the gut into the pelvic area, this poor bacterial environment. And like I said, antibiotics have shown improvement, but also FODMAP diets have shown improvement. So I think that this is an exciting thing to consider. Is endometriosis, many of the treatments for endometriosis are horrendous, and it is an incredibly painful condition. That I think that this link that's happened with bacteria is really opening up the doors of being able to offer solutions for women who suffer with endometriosis. The histamine connection. So histamine is produced, it's produced in the body when we have it's allergies, hives, itching, digestive issues, is a buildup of histamine. It's an inflammatory response. And the body produces enzymes, it's DAO, diamine oxidase, to keep histamine in check, and SIBO inhibits the body from producing DAO. Also, when SIBO is present in the gut, it produces particular types of bacteria that stimulate the production of histamine. So one of the classic things that we see with our clients who have SIBO is a histamine reaction. Things like they'll suddenly get hay fever, they suddenly get allergies, they're suddenly intolerant to loads of foods, they've got really itchy skin, and
weird things coming up on their skin.
And when I see that as a recent symptom, and maybe there's been food poisoning or there's a big hormonal shift, and they've got gut dysbiosis or gut symptoms, I'm like, okay, right, I want to be looking at SIBO. What's also interesting is that the placenta produces a huge amount of this enzyme DAO, which is why histamine intolerance and food sensitivities can often improve during pregnancy. Woman's pregnant. That's another clue that you can look for when you're working with your clients, is asking those questions. Did your histamine intolerance go down when you were pregnant? And if it did, then that is showing that there's potentially a SIBO connection. Oh, the bowel hormone storm.
So the bowel hormone storm. So again, this is a clinic model that we created and worked with. So let's just look at IBS. Let's start with IBS. What about 11 o'clock on your cycle? So with IBS, we have erratic eating. It hurts. We don't want to eat. But that then causes a blood sugar instability. And as we've discussed, there's a high insulin connection with blood sugar instability because we're constantly producing it. And also this lowered motilin connection. So that then, the blood sugar instability, we've also mentioned, it goes on to produce quite a lot of cortisol because the blood sugars are spiking and dropping. As soon as I've got a motilin imbalance, this is going on, this migrating motor complex issue, I now have a connection with the ileocecal valve, which is one of the structures in the bowel that separates the small and the large intestine, and this peristalsis. So if the motilin's not doing its job and I've got cortisol, that peristalsis isn't happening, and I'm going to get irritable bowel syndrome, either constipated or diarrhea, so either or. As soon as there's cortisol going on in the body on a regular basis, we're in a stress response. And as we mentioned earlier, that stress response will mean that we are not producing enough acid and enzymes. Alongside the cortisol, as we've shown with the pregnenolone steal, what's going to happen is I'm just not going to be making enough of my background progesterone. I'm also not going to be making enough testosterone, and I'm going to have higher levels of estrogen. That high estrogen, not only from our hormones, but also we talked about the endotoxins and the xenoestrogens. And this actually boosts serotonin and pain. And whilst serotonin sounds like a lovely hormone in elevated amounts, it contributes to pain. So this high estrogen, this cortisol, all of these things are actually then, and this high, the low progesterone is then, as Laura was talking about, it spikes this histamine and inflammation, which contributes to more food intolerance. And after all of this, my liver is going to be really overwhelmed because it's now trying to deal with all of this buildup of hormones, and it can't do it very well, which ultimately then contributes to more irritable bowel syndrome and erratic eating. And so SIBO being behind this, we have to deal with the SIBO. Otherwise, we're going to be trying to deal with every single one of these bits individually.
Oh, I missed a slide here. I wanted to talk about the muscle connection. I've talked a little bit about this. Is when it comes to SIBO and IBS. I mean, this is our work as kinesiologists. Is you can see around the chest area, we've got the pecs, and we've got the abdominals. We also have the leg muscles are connected into the digestion. What we see in our clinical practice is when we've got this bowel hormone storm going on, and someone is eating foods that they shouldn't do, and they're super stressed, and their estrogen is sky high, and their progesterone has disappeared, and their histamine's all over the place, is that the body is under this stress response and it affects the muscles. And so we can see there are stress muscles and there are digestive muscles in the legs that tighten, that go in balance. They tilt the pelvis. When the pelvis is tilted, then the digestive system is in the wrong position to be able to digest. One of the other things that we see, and it's classic in the gastric band surgery. If you've seen anybody who's had the gastric band surgery, there is this, we see this connection with all the muscles in the chest that are connected into the stomach. When the stomach is impaired, all of this tips forward. And so then someone is now eating in an impaired position, which means, and the digestive system is cramped in, you're then creating a structural position for SIBO, because the digestive system cannot work efficiently. So if you go down our kinesiology route, we also work structurally to be able to get the valves in the bowel working, the space in the stomach. We work with the muscles to be able to switch them on. We get individuals eating the right food so that they're structurally in the right place to be able to digest. There it is, the muscle organ connection. I knew it was there somewhere. Oh, wow. So that is, there's a lot of science in there. And it's something that Claire and I absolutely love doing, is sitting and chewing the fat, now that we can digest it. To be able to
both got rid of our SIBO.
Now that we can understand this hormone interplay, that SIBO can be such a victim to the cortisol that's high, the sex hormones that are out, the blood sugar instability, the food intolerances. When we really understand that, then we can start to work with SIBO in a really special way. Because then there are a number of practitioners out there that if you go and see them on the first appointment, you'll get a SIBO breath test, you'll get a diagnosis of having SIBO, and then maybe there will be a strict diet with some other herbs or antibiotics, and there you go. I think it is so important to be looking at this in this whole picture to be able to really get underneath it, and that is how we work. So that's how we work. So the SIBO test, we work with a company called Health Path, who do breath tests. You can either get a breath test with lactulose or glucose. Now, we tend to work with people who are very poorly and have some really, really sensitive digestive conditions. And so doing a breath test with lactulose can actually be quite a painful experience if there is also a lactose intolerance. So glucose can be more preferred for the very sensitive clients. And so yes, you can get that from Health Path. We also work with kinesiology muscle testing. We have a lovely clinical trial that showed that there's a particular muscle in the body that is able to be indicative that there is a SIBO imbalance. So it's one of the abdominal muscles for any of you kinesiologists out there. So this is our stages of treatment.
Oh, it's lovely.
Go on, you can go for this one.
Oh, so this is the bit that I was saying earlier, that actually the doctors who really understand SIBO understand that the medical intervention, which is the last part for us, is actually, it should be the last part for us, and that our work has to come first, because otherwise their intervention is not going to do anything. So we have to get the blood sugars balanced, and we have to get them on the right diet. So that means ensuring enough protein, getting the right fat, and being really understanding the carbohydrates, and also being incredibly hot on food intolerances. So we work with our food intolerance hierarchy, which, as Laura said, strongly recommend that you go and check out the previous talk. We've got to work on stress reduction. I say it a million times, and I will continue to say it a million times. Why do people keep turning up at my front door tonight? That's not what I keep saying a million times. That actually our job as coaches is to show people the issues in their diet, their lifestyles, their exercise choices, and hold their hands whilst they make those changes, because making those changes can be really, really tough. So stress reduction, key. We're going to be working with supplementation as well as diet, and also some good coaching. Hormone balancing, got to get the body stopping doing that pregnenolone steal. And in the cases of women with these gut issues and with some hormone issues, we have to get that estrogen dominance down. Then the liver detoxing. Now, this is the fundamental flaw that we see in so many practitioners' work, is that they are doing liver detoxing first. We can't do the liver detoxing until we've got all these other bits sorted. The body's just going to be in even greater stress. It just doesn't make any sense. Then we can work with the digestive system and immune function. We do that with certain supplementation and making sure that the digestion is working before we do breath tests and referral.
I like that the functional nutritionists will work with lab tests really early on. And I think that's limiting, because it is a picture of someone who is potentially eating the wrong foods, super stressed, hormones all over the place, on the pill, digestive system not working. And so the way that we work is that we get these things in place first before we start ordering the expensive lab tests. And I mean, here we're looking at SIBO, so the breath test comes at the end, and then if we still haven't been able to get underneath the SIBO and it's still testing positive, that is when we look at a referral onto a gastroenterologist who can recommend the antibiotics. And what's exciting about this is that the antibiotics have a much greater chance of working if we've got all the other things in place. And we've seen this with hormone balancing as well, when hormones are all over the place. If we can get the foundations in place, then there's going to be a much higher chance of success. And our clients are not spending a load of money on a load of tests that are not giving them the really clear information, because it's a really muddied water when you've got loads of rubbish going in.
Absolutely. And as to give you an idea, and I mean, it's how long is a piece of string, but I always say to clients, we're looking at least 3 to 6 months to see if that's changing the diet, making sure we've got all of the food intolerances out, we're doing everything, we've done the stress reduction, we've got everything going on before we're looking at the breast test and referral. And then after that, you are still going to be staying on the diet and working with some of those herbal preparations. So realistically, you are looking at a 9-month plus journey here. It is not a quick fix. But the great thing is once people have gone through this process, they really understand their body. They've done the antibiotics with the doctor. They're back doing some of the herbal bits, the blood sugar balancing. They're working on their stress. As soon as they start to feel anything kind of creeping up, because it's you're not just going to kill it and it goes away. It's like we have to then maintain the right environment. So then they'll actually be aware of, oh, okay, yeah, no, I've slipped back into eating that thing, or I've gone back to doing that thing. Okay, I need to rein it back in again. But when we work, but they'll be able to spot it quickly, because a lot of people have had SIBO for a decade and not even known it. And so very often once you've cleared it, then it doesn't build up to quite the same levels as it was at.
So that's our stages of treatment, which is working with an individual, and this is our focused SIBO protocol. So we start with a microbiome diet, which we're going to cover in a minute, and the microbiome diet looks primarily at macronutrient balancing and food intolerance elimination. It also, we look at eliminating toxic chemicals, so we're looking at going much more organic, and so we're restricting those pesticides that are going in. Once that's in place and the client is comfortable with the eating and the food intolerances have gone, then we see where we are at. And if the gut environment is starting to improve, then we can start to put in the missing nutrients. This is one of the side effects with SIBO. It's a classic example. If someone's got SIBO, is that they will lose a lot of weight, because the bacterial overgrowth will stop the absorption of key nutrients. I made that connection between the bile and the being able to, it no longer is able to digest fats. Well, we then lose our fat soluble vitamins, such as vitamin A, D, E, and K. And these are massive nutrients for the immune system. It's another connection with why SIBO is huge in the immune system. And so what we need to do is start to repair. We need to remove the rubbish. And when the gut is starting to feel a little bit more like it can cope, then we want to be putting those missing nutrients in. The difficulty with putting missing nutrients into someone who's still eating a load of rubbish is it's just never going to get absorbed.
No.
So also in this replace category, we put in digestive aid. We work with enzymes and acid. We also work with bile salts. So if the SIBO is stopping the bile from breaking down the fats, then we introduce a bile salt that will start processing the fats again. Which, when we come back to the original Claire's pregnenolone steal, we need fats, because they create our hormones. So we need fats for lots of things. It's also for brain health and skin health and everything. And so if we're not digesting our fats properly, then we're in a real pickle. So we replace the missing nutrients. Then we re-inoculate. This is when we can look at pre and probiotics.
And again, just want to say that so many people are putting those in at the beginning. And I like to talk about SIBO being like zombie bacteria. They're not, and I'm being really mean about them, but like I just like the visual. So if I've got SIBO and I'm just taking a load of probiotics, there's about a couple of billion bacteria in each capsule. When I'm taking that, it's like the endotoxins in my gut from the SIBO are literally just going to kill off that bacteria and make more zombie bacteria. So then people who have SIBO, it's actually a really great alarm bell when you've got people who say, oh, I can't take probiotics. And this came from our original IBS work, was we were like, no one with IBS can actually tolerate probiotics. And then it turned out it's because they've usually got SIBO underlying. So those probiotics are actually going to be contributing to more endotoxins and more SIBO. So you have to be in the right place for that re-inoculation. And there's a fascinating work now around pre and probiotics, and actually even taking them from in supplement form isn't the best way. Or drinks, like just not actually ingesting them. There are other ways of doing them which are more species appropriate.
And pre and probiotics is such a contentious issue with us, and we do test for them and we do work with them, and they are not right for everybody. And like Claire said, if you are putting pre or probiotics in and you're getting gut reactions, then the SIBO hasn't been addressed. So then you kind of go backwards and go, right, we're going to need to do some more work with the herbs. And the herbs will go into, that's missing from this slide, it will go into the remove and replace. We start with herbs. So I'm going to cover that on the next slide. And then we go into repair. This is putting in the amino acids. We like L-glutamine, we like L-arginine, we like L-citrulline for being really repairing for that gut wall. We really want to repair that leaky gut. Omega-3 is really key for repair, and wonderful, wonderful bone broth. Now, bone broth, again, if you've got someone who's got rife SIBO, they may get a histamine intolerance from bone broth. So it's a really good sign when someone is able to digest and process bone broth that their gut bacteria is under control. So it's why we don't recommend it that early on, because it can cause more problems if the gut bacteria hasn't been addressed. Come on to herbs in a minute. Talk about the diet.
Yes, so with all of the diets that we use, we work with different diets depending on different people's health conditions and where they're at. And this is the microbiome repair diet. But the one thing that all of our diets have in common is this balance of the macronutrients. So a balance of the protein, fats, and the carbohydrate in the right proportions to balance blood sugars. That is always at the basis of our work, because at the basis of the triangle is blood sugar stabilization. So it doesn't matter where people are going on their health journey and which diet they're following, it's always going to be protein, fat, and carbohydrate balanced. So they're going to be eating meats, fish, eggs or egg yolks, particularly if they've got really bad IBS, they might not be able to tolerate egg whites, tofu and protein powders. There are some condiments they can have. There's a couple of sweeteners they can have. So with honey, we need to change that so it says raw unfiltered honey, because it's the raw unfiltered honey that actually doesn't spike blood sugars and actually adds in nitric oxide to the bloodstream, which is actually blood sugar balancing. It's fascinating. Honey is fascinating. Then we have lots of lovely fats, and we have carbohydrates are basically in two sections. We have our non-starchy carbohydrates, which would be, so what we've done here is this is like an amalgamation of the autoimmune diet and the FODMAP diet, because neither are successful on their own. So we've basically taken the research of both a step further and actually combined it into the microbiome repair diet. And we are then, so non-starchy carbohydrates are unlimited, but our starchy carbohydrates are limited. It's a ½ cup serving per meal, so it's small. And so this is where you start to see that vegetarians, vegans, for example, where their diet is predominantly starchy carbohydrate based, it just becomes no surprise then why there is this gut imbalance, why there's a blood sugar imbalance, why these symptoms are coming off. And so it's not that we're anti those diets, it's just they have to be macronutrient balanced.
The other thing to mention here is that we recommend limiting raw fruit and vegetable. This is primarily to do with the ileocecal valve. Actually, the digestion, when the digestion is compromised, it just doesn't like raw fruit and vegetables. So like steaming fruit and vegetables, lightly cooking, just to start to break it down, making it easier for the body to process. And then there's quite a few foods in the microbiome diet that we avoid. These are our food intolerances. This is the grains, legumes, dairy, nightshades, and we limit the brassicas and the alliums. It depends on the client. I mean, the alliums, the onions, garlic, leeks, high FODMAP. This is the FODMAP piece of work that we we brought in, and is a classic sign that there is SIBO when someone's got an allium intolerance. So we've got limit, but with some clients you may need to
cut them out completely. Yeah,
absolutely.
And brassicas are incredibly can be incredibly inflammatory for people with bowel disorders. There's a lot to do with oxalates. There's a lot to do with how they affect the uptake of our nutrients. And yeah, it's quite controversial, and it is really new research, but it is fascinating.
So this is our diet pathway that we work with in our college, and I think we wanted to show this where the food, the microbiome repair diet fits, because we would always start with removing the gateway allergens, and then and making sure that the macronutrients, like Claire said, are balanced, that there's a balance of protein, fats and carbs. We want to be removing the cortisol stimulators if they're stress, so limiting or avoiding caffeine and alcohol. We have a hormone reset diet. This is more for our perimenopause stage in life, where there's sort of problem weight gain, which we'll cover in other talks. But it's usually we look at balancing the hormones first before we even start looking at repairing the microbiome. And this is an unusual way of working, because if you've got digestive symptoms and you go and see a practitioner, they'll often start with the microbiome work, but we need to make sure that these things are in place first. And then we go even deeper. If the microbiome repair diet can be amazing for clients. However, there will be a section of clients who don't get better on it.
Horrendous hormone issues, horrendous inflammatory conditions, autoimmune diseases, just really struggling, people who have struggled for a long time and have tried everything usually.
Or if there has been some real SIBO, SIFO damage to the gut, and they've had it for years and they have been on it all kinds of crazy diets and they've lost loads of weight, or they're just in such a pickle, we then have the systemic reset diet, which is fascinating for SIBO. So the systemic diets that we've created is based on a carnivore diet principle. And one of the fascinating pieces of research that has come out, it's a very, very small study. Claire and I are quite keen to actually see if we can do our own study on this, because so if there's any SIBO clients out there who would like to put this to the test, we would really like to do a trial on it.
We too are those. We have been those guinea pigs.
So there were 6 patients in a functional medicine clinic who tested positive for hydrogen SIBO, and they followed a carnivore style diet and all tested negative 4 weeks later. There was one patient who only managed to do 2 weeks and still tested negative for SIBO afterwards, which I think is utterly fascinating. So it is, at the moment, it's really new information. It's quite a controversial diet. It does make people and clients, there is a lot of conversation that needs to be had, a lot of education around it. But it is exciting to see that there is this stage that we can take clients to that can be really, really healing.
Yeah, I'm a fan. Been on it a year.
So supplements, this comes into once we've removed the food intolerances. I mean, you can really see when we remove the food intolerances and we get someone on a macronutrient balanced diet, you can see a lot of symptoms drop off. However, we may need to introduce supplements. We do love working with supplements. Like I said, we like to put digestive enzymes in, betaine or bile. We use berberine for hydrogen dominant. The studies show that the berberine is more effective on hydrogen, and oregano is more effective on methane dominant. So if you have a breath test and you can see what style, what type of SIBO they have, then you can tweak your supplement recommendations. Once you get into the gut repair part, the L-glutamine and L-arginine are amazing for that, and that is repairing that leaky gut so that you're not getting the endotoxins going back into the bloodstream. Saccharomyces
boulardii. It's so hard to say,
and it never rolls off the tongue. It's a really great probiotic that can be taken when antibiotics are being taken, because it's not necessarily a probiotic. It is more of a fungal supplement. And also the soil-based probiotics rather than the lactose-based probiotics. If you've got someone with a very, very sensitive gut, the soil-based probiotics are easier and cause less problems with intolerances. Diatomaceous earth is a lovely supplement that we use if there are parasites present. Some of the parasite symptoms: itching again, itchy nose, an itchy bum.
But also in terms of SIBO, it's just about, it creates an environment that the SIBO can't flourish in. So that's actually how diatomaceous earth works. It's phenomenal for parasites and just generally gut dysbiosis. It just creates an environment where things that aren't supposed to be thriving can thrive.
Yeah, it's a lovely product that helps either balance, it moves constipation, or it balances diarrhea. Is one of those wonderful things. We love to work with adaptogens. We often work with adaptogens from a hormone perspective, and what's exciting is the adaptogens that work on the hormones as well as working as a gut microbial. So Tulsi, which is holy basil, and olive leaf are my go-tos for someone who's got digestive issues or SIBO, and they've also got a stress picture and a hormone picture. NAC is a great liver detoxer for biofilm breakdown. So the SIBO creates like a little shell, a protective shell to keep itself safe, I guess. And what's wonderful about NAC is it breaks that shell down so that you can start dealing with the bacteria. And it also supports the liver to be able to clear the bacteria out. So NAC, it's also an immune support. It's an
immune support, and it also, as I was about to say, is it's one of the estrogen detoxers for estrogen dominance. So it works not only on our actual estrogen when it's dominant, it also works on the xenoestrogens because of how it's helping with the liver. So NAC is like, it kind of ticks all the boxes.
So this is absolutely how we would work, is we would be looking at the diets, we would be looking at lifestyle, and we'd be adding in supplements with someone who's got SIBO. Is the end.
So end recording.